In 1988, on a calm spring morning, the usual peace of one community in Winnetka, Illinois, was tragically shattered. That morning, Laurie Dann's horrifying crime spree, driven by an insane rage, would leave death, tears, and destruction in her wake, in a lasting impact felt by the inhabitants affected by her madness, and led to a loss of innocence for many. Hello, strangers and strangelings. Welcome back to the Strange Bar and Grill. I'm serving up another true crime story time, so pull up a chair if you like strange true crime and storytelling, then this is the place to be, here with me, JP. So kick back, grab a drink or a snack, and remember to always tip that like button because it helps with the channel. Join that SBG family by subscribing and hitting that notification bell to make sure you're getting notified when I release a weekly video. All right, guys, let's go. Laurie was born in Chicago in 1957 to parents Norman and Edith Wasserman, where she grew up as a shy and withdrawn child in the affluent northern suburb of Glencoe. In 1975, after graduating from New Trier High School in Winnetka, Wisconsin, Laurie started attending Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. She later transferred to the University of Arizona, where she spent the following 4 years, of which she never actually graduated from. Although somewhat intended to become a teacher, Laurie had more so desired to find a husband. During this 4-year period, she began dating a pre-med student with whom her relationship was fated to crumble. Once Laurie started becoming possessive and demanding, their relationship was doomed. Since she had expected to get married to a doctor, even less focus was put on her academic pursuits. When her boyfriend eventually ended their relationship, he had no way of knowing it would not be the last he'd hear from his ex. After her breakup, now with even less interest in continuing her education there, Laurie moved back to the Chicago area in 1980. After returning home, Laurie occasionally went to some adult education classes. She never completed them either. Then on one summer day, while employed as a cocktail waitress, she met her future husband, Laurie Dann, the son of a wealthy family from Highland Park, who worked as an executive in an insurance broker firm. He and Laurie eventually got married in September of 1982. Following their wedding, it didn't take long for Russell to notice his new wife's quirks. After starting a new life together in a stunning $230,000 house in Highland, which, that's crazy, $230K for a house, and that's probably like upscale back in those days, because now that same house is probably worth like $700K plus, maybe even more nowadays, who knows? That's pretty nuts. Anyway, back to the story. Laurie expressed no desire to decorate their new home or even clean it. When she did do laundry, she would put it away in drawers while still sopping wet and leave it there just to become moldy and disgusting. She kept her makeup in the microwave and at least several times threw cash in the backseat of her car like trash. Russell would frequently come home from work to a messy house and no dinner waiting for him. This despite the fact Laurie spent her days watching television. During the several years their marriage ultimately lasted, Laurie's quirks gradually worsened. At one point, she began displaying behaviors associated with obsessive-compulsive disorder, such as tapping her foot on the ground at every stoplight. She also started compulsively washing her hands. Not long after, she became reclusive to the point where she didn't like attending her husband's social engagements. She and Russell eventually separated in October 1985, during which time Laurie moved back in with her parents. Although she began seeing a psychiatrist around this time, it was only briefly. Throughout the divorce negotiations, Laurie's behavior escalated to accusing her soon-to-be former husband of being abusive, and several marital disputes ensued. At this time, Laurie also began harassing Russell and his family over the phone on multiple occasions. He and his family would not be the last people Laurie would persecute, nor would it be the last time she did so towards them. The following year, in April, Laurie falsely accused Russell of breaking into her parents' home and vandalizing it. Shortly afterwards, she purchased what would be the first of several guns. She would get a Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum At the time, she told the salesman that she was getting it for self-defense. Once the local police learned of the gun, they became very concerned and tried convincing her and her family to give it up, with no success. At another point, that same year, Russell was stabbed with an ice pick as he slept one night by an unknown assailant, of which missed his heart by an inch. Although a store clerk subsequently identified Laurie as the person who purchased the ice pick a few days earlier, she was not seen entering or leaving Russell's apartment. As a result, since there was nothing but circumstantial evidence to go on, the matter came down to he said, she said. And what's worse for Russell was when he failed a polygraph test and Laurie played the victim card perfectly, all which accumulated in the charges getting dropped. Much to his dismay, around the same time, Laurie began harassing her ex-boyfriend from college, who by then was a resident at a hospital and a married man with children. Through phone calls and letters, the harassment soon escalated to death threats. She further claimed to him to be pregnant with his child, despite neither of them having spoken or seen each other in many, many years. When he refused to believe her, she retaliated by calling his workplace, falsely accusing him of SA. The harassment campaign did not end until his lawyers sent a letter to her parents asking them to control her behavior. In January, Laurie tried her hand at babysitting. Due to her apparent friendly and shy outward demeanor, at least one mother had hired her without hesitation and even recommended her to friends. However, much like with Russell, several of Laurie's clients soon started noticing her very off behavior for themselves after she'd leave. Damaged furniture, rugs cut up, and items missing, just to name a few of these things. And of course, Laurie denied everything when confronted. And it got to the point where these clients made complaints to the police, though nothing was ultimately done due to circumstantial evidence. And at least on one occasion, her father ended up paying for the damage. In April, with their divorce nearly finalized, Laurie accused Russell of SA, to which no evidence was found to support that. Although she did pass 2 polygraph tests, which is wild. Think about that. Once completed, Laurie was left with a cash settlement of $125,000 and subsequently moved back in with her parents in Glencoe. During this time, she became obsessed with personal hygiene, developed an aversion to being touched, and continued compulsively washing her hands. A month later, in May, Russell was further falsely accused of planting an explosive device in the home his ex-wife still shared with her parents, although no charges were filed against Russell for either claim. Throughout the whole process, her parents believed, supported, and defended her. As this went on, Laurie saw another psychiatrist who later concluded that she wasn't a threat to herself or others. That psychiatrist sucks. They need a new profession. By summertime, Laurie transferred to Northwestern University to complete a degree at which her father, sublet a university apartment on campus in Evanston, Illinois. During her time there, she never took classes. Some sources say she dropped all of them, but either way, she never graduated from there. And at some point, she was persuaded by her father to return home after the university contacted him. The reason they did so was because of the multiple complaints made over her behavior, which involved leaving pieces of meat to rot in sofa cushions and stuffing garbage into student boxes. In the fall, Laurie falsely accused Russell of sending her threatening letters as well as assaulting her again. This time around, though, the police did not believe her. And just a few weeks later, she would purchase her second gun, a .32 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. She acquired her third and final gun, a 22 semi-automatic Beretta, towards the end of December. So she's just like collecting guns and gearing up for something here. After returning home, Laurie went back to babysitting, where she resumed destroying her clients' furniture and stealing hundreds of dollars worth of their food. As he had done previously, her father again paid for the damages. so her father is a hardcore enabler. Since November 1987, Laurie was living in Madison, Wisconsin, near the University of Wisconsin campus. During this time, she saw another psychiatrist who specialized in obsessive-compulsive disorders. Notably, the psychiatrist increased the dosage of the unlicensed clomipramine she was already taking for her OCD at the time, and also added lithium carbonate for her mood swings. Behavioral therapy was also added to her treatment. Despite these measures, nothing could have prepared anyone for the actions Laurie would later take. In January 1988, Laurie was enrolled as a guest student at the university and was welcomed to monitor classes. During her time there, she exhibited more strange, bizarre behavior, such as riding up and down in elevators for hours, walking around naked in the hallways, and somehow managed to turn her dorm room into a public health hazard by leaving trash and rotting food everywhere. In March, she began stealing books on poisons from the local library, diluting arsenic and other chemicals from a lab. She also shoplifted clothes and wigs, during which time she was arrested once, then released on a $200 bond. To avoid jail time, she was accepted into a first offenders program. Shortly afterward, one of the dorm rooms in her building was set on fire, and while Laurie was suspected, no proof was ever found pointing to her as being behind it all. That same month, she stopped going to her appointments with both her psychiatrist and behavioral therapist. And at one point, both her father and psychiatrist tried convincing her to enter the hospital as an inpatient, but failed when she refused. The following month, in April, Laurie again started harassing her ex-husband and his family, as well as her ex-college boyfriend and his wife through phone calls. These new calls soon escalated to more death threats. She also made several hang-up calls to various former babysitting clients too. In May, a letter was sent to her ex-boyfriend's hospital where he still worked, and in it, she falsely accused him again of assault. The ex-boyfriend, fearing the publicity that could come from it, opted out of pressing charges until they could be filed in Illinois. The thought of Laurie getting bail and following through with her threats also prompted him to take this route. Unlike her previous harassment campaign, however, her actions this time around provoked the involvement of the FBI. On May 13th, the FBI informed the local police that Laurie might have a gun. In reality, authorities were finally made aware of the fact that she had 3 guns in her possession, all of which were pistols that she had obtained legally. As a result, when the police tried confiscating her guns, her father refused to relinquish them. At the time, he cited that his daughter needed them for protection against her ex-husband. Her father is a moron. Clearly, his daughter has some mental issues here, and he keeps enabling her. He's enabling this bad behavior. The next day, May 14th, at the end of the current semester at the University of Wisconsin, Laurie's behavior further devolved. A fellow student found his clothes slashed and his books destroyed, to which Laurie was implicated, but of course, they couldn't make anything stick. Later that night, a staff member discovered Laurie naked and asleep in the fetal position on a pile of trash in the garbage room. She was sweating profusely and covered with a garbage bag. Someone needs to take the trash out and take her with it. By the time the police arrived, Laurie had already returned to her room. Despite noting the filthy and disorganized state of her room, she convinced them that no medical assistance was needed. How in the hell is she convincing these cops to go away? The police also found no gun and thus concluded that it wasn't necessary to take her into protective custody. And by the time the FBI came to question her the next day, Laurie was already gone, having returned to her parents. 4 days later, on May 19th, Laurie went to the home of one of her babysitting clients in Glencoe. The family declined her offer to babysit as they were planning on moving to New York soon. However, they then agreed to let her take their sons to a fair the next morning, all while totally unaware of her declining mental health. Later on that night, Laurie stayed up pretty much all night, making preparations for what would go down as her ultimate reign of madness. She made Rice Krispie treats and prepared packaged juice drinks, adding arsenic to the mix. Finally, on May 20th in 1988, in the early morning hours that Friday, Laurie's reign of madness began. First, she mailed multiple samples of her toxic treats and snacks and juice boxes to a couple of nearby fraternities and 6 homes of acquaintances and former babysitting clients in the Glencoe, Highland Park, and Winnetka areas. Fortunately, no one died from drinking her poisoned drinks for several reasons. 1, they were found to be leaking out of their containers. 2, they had a very foul smell to them. And those of her victims who had drunk them survived an account of the arsenic being too diluted. At about 9 a.m., she drove to Winnetka to the house of one of her babysitting clients, the Rush family. The Rushes, unaware of her mental instability, went ahead and allowed Laurie to take their 2 youngest children, both boys, on an outing. They just handed their kids right over to this maniac. After leaving with the Rush boys, Laurie took them to Ravenna Elementary School, where she had mistakenly believed her former sister-in-law's sons were attending. Upon arriving at the school, she left the Rush boys in the car while she entered the building and set a firebomb off. As the firebomb went off, she promptly left. The resulting fire was quickly discovered and put out before any actual damage could be done. Thank goodness. She went to a local daycare where at least one of her former sister-in-law's children did attend. Once there, she attempted to get in with a plastic can of gasoline, only to be stopped by staff. After failing to get in, she fled with the Rush boys still in her care and brought them back to their home. Once back at the Rush residence, Laurie offered the boys some of her poisoned drinks, though both boys actually spat them out immediately after finding out how bad they tasted. Then after taking them downstairs to the basement where their mother was doing laundry, she mumbled something about having to leave. Seconds later, the basement stairs were on fire. Although trapped, the mother and her children managed to escape through a window unharmed. While the Rush house was burned and the family had yet to escape, Laurie next headed to the Hubbard Woods Elementary School, all 3 of her guns in her possession. Upon arriving on campus around 10:30 a.m., she entered the school, walked into a 2nd grade classroom where she stayed briefly. After leaving the room, Laurie roamed along a corridor undetected when a boy appeared walking towards her from the other direction. Upon walking by him, she shoved him into a nearby boys' bathroom where 2 other boys were in at the time, then shot the first boy in the stomach with her Beretta. After shooting him, she tried firing at the other 2 boys as well with her Smith & Wesson Magnum revolver, but failed when it jammed, allowing both of the boys to run out unharmed. After the boys escaped, Laurie discarded her jammed revolver into a trash can along with its spare ammunition, then fled the scene. After throwing her gun away, Laurie returned to the 2nd grade classroom from earlier, where a test on bicycle safety was now taking place. When she demanded those present to line up, the female teacher in charge attempted to disarm her. In the ensuing struggle, her Beretta was unloaded. With her 2nd gun now unusable, Laurie took out her 3rd and final gun, the .32 caliber Smith & Wesson, and shot wildly through the classroom, hitting 3 boys and 2 girls in the process. After the shooting, Laurie bolted from the building. While fleeing the area, she crashed her car into a tree on a one-way street, then ditched it. And while fleeing the area, she crashed her car into a tree on a one-way street, then ditched her car. Before ditching her vehicle, though, she removed her blood-soaked shorts and replaced them with a blue trash bag, which she tied around her waist. Then after reloading her .32 Smith & Wesson, she crossed a backyard before entering the Andrews residence through an unlocked door. After wandering into the kitchen, she was met with Ruth Andrews and her 20-year-old son, Philip, a college swimmer who was home for the summer from the University of Illinois. Laurie tells them that the police were after her thanks to a misunderstanding after she had shot her rapist. Despite nothing about the situation actually making any sense to them, both the mother and son tried helping her out. While Ruth fetched one of her daughter's shorts to give to Laurie, Philip discreetly pocketed Laurie's Beretta, then convinced her to call her mother. After telling her mother, Edith, that she had done something terrible, Edith tried getting her daughter to surrender. Her mother also tried reassuring her that everything was going to be all right. From that point, Philip took the phone and suggested to Edith that she'd come and pick Laurie up, to which she responded that she could not, as she had no car. And after her call to Edith, Mr. Andrew unexpectedly returned home, walking in through the back door. After calling her mother again, Laurie allowed Philip's parents to leave, even when she still refused to surrender her last gun. And when Philip then tried going as well, Laurie stopped him. Not long after, realizing the police were fast approaching, Laurie and Philip got into a fight over the gun. After the gun went off once, Philip dove for cover in a pantry, kicking the door shut. But at this point, he realized he had actually been shot in his chest. As Laurie ran to an upstairs bedroom, Philip managed to stagger out of the house through the back door with Laurie's Beretta still in his hands. Responding police officers promptly rescued him. The entire rampage finally came to an end once officials stormed the Andrew residence and discovered Laurie dead via self-deletion. Following her rampage, almost everyone made it out. None of the people who received her poisoned snacks or drinks actually died from consuming them. The Rush family escaped their home after Laurie set it ablaze. Of the 7 people she shot, including 6 children under 10 and 20-year-old Philip, all but one, 8-year-old Nicholas Corwin, survived. Alright guys, that's going to be it for today. If you guys like today's story, make sure you guys leave a like, a comment, and if you're new to my channel, I appreciate it if you were to subscribe, especially if you guys like hearing strange true crime stories. And as always, I'm always curious to hear the opinions of the SBG family. What do you guys think of this story? Do you guys think her medication might have something to do with this? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section. But as always, be good, be safe. Ugh, Laurie's dirty. Ugh, good googly moogly, disgusting. Laurie Dann? Should be like, Laurie, damn, you disgusting. Laurie Dann? More like, Laurie, damn, what the hell is wrong with you?